Welcome back, everybody, to the HorrorScope podcast. I'm your host, Hunter Chambliss, and as always, I have my co-host, Russell Howell. How's it going, man?
It's going good, man. Really looking forward to talking about this classic film. Definitely one of my all-time favorites. I'm talking about the 1978 horror film by John Carpenter, Halloween. This is something I revisit all the time, every year for Halloween time. I love the film. I think it still holds up 40 years later, and just really looking forward to talking about this with our guest today.
Oh, yes, and we have a big guest, ladies and gentlemen, from the schmoedown, from the Action Guys, Ben Bateman. How's it going, man?
What's up, guys? How you doing? Thanks for having me on the show. This is exciting. I, believe it or not, just watched this movie for the first time for this very podcast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
Yeah, he actually told me that previously, and I was kind of shocked that you haven't seen this before.
Yeah, there's like movies, this genre, I would say in general, is one that I'm less versed in the classics than I probably should be. I didn't really grow up watching a lot of horror. I did a review of the new Halloween, and I remember the movies coming out in my lifetime. Like I remember when H2O came out, but this original, it's like at this point it's old enough you have to really choose to go back and watch it. I don't feel like it's just a prerequisite anymore.
For sure, especially with like all the new ones coming out and stuff like that. Now, just a quick question about visiting this for the first time with fresh eyes. Did this movie kind of change the way you looked at it, having viewed all these other Halloween films at all? Like, the 2018 film, obviously, and some of the other, sequels to follow. I don't know how many that you've seen previously.
Definitely. I mean, I think that the opening sequence in this film is pretty frightening. And just him standing there with a knife, I think, is a really very iconic moment, it felt like. So that's one thing that I always really like in movies is when you watch something for the first time and you have that feeling when you're watching it of like, oh, this must be a pretty iconic moment because it feels that way. Yeah. And that definitely felt like it, like just him standing there with that blank look on his face. And I thought the score was obviously I knew the music, but the score might have been my favorite part of the whole movie. It's just like perfect.
It drives the film. I mean, I've told Hunter this time and time again. I think that Carpenter's score absolutely drives this film, and it's so simple too. It kind of reminds me John Williams' simple score to Jaws. Pretty much, it's very easy.
Yeah.
And it's a very easy score, but it works, and it really conveys the entire emotion of the film throughout.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
And that's one thing I actually love about this is how the score really feels like a character in its own. It doesn't feel like just music in the background. It feels like, okay, something major is happening because you hear the music kick in at a certain time. The way that John Carpenter uses the music is really like, it's subtle, it's very simple, but it's to the point, and oh my God, something bad is going to happen here.
Yeah, it's repetitive, but it definitely feels like repetitive in a good way. Like the movie feels as much like this. The movie feels as much like the score as anything else. I would say the score kind of embodies the tone of this movie better than anything.
It's like the heartbeat of the film, pretty much. I would think.
Yeah, I agree.
Easily.
And I think Carpenter really times that each song that he puts in it perfectly. I think it's relevant to the scene, and it sets the scene up. It makes you have all the feels when you're watching, and I think that's important.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So we just got off topic there a little bit, but definitely on topic. But Ben, as somebody who watched this recently, why don't you give us just your overall first impressions on this movie?
I mean, I really, really liked it. I was totally engrossed. I think it's introducing Jamie Lee Curtis, so I think it's always so fascinating when you see somebody who's still making movies. I met her last summer, I guess, at the Halloween press line at San Diego, and she's still a total badass. She handles herself really well, and she's funny and she's sharp. So it's crazy to think, 40 years later, right? That's wild. I think obviously like any genre, 40 years does a number when it comes to, special effects or makeup. And so there are some things where it's obviously not as realistic or gory as it maybe would be.
Mm-hmm.
I liked how short it was, to be honest. It's one thing I say about movies all the time is I re-reviewed the first Toy Story recently, and it's this is 90 minutes. This is wonderful. Yeah. You can do so much in that time with a movie that so often movies have to be 2 hours, 2 hours, 10 minutes now. And this movie wouldn't be as good if it was an extra 30 minutes. even 20 minutes. It's perfect. Like you need it to move the way that it moves.
I feel, and it's funny, I always think of a Judd Apatow movie. I know completely different genre,
Right.
but I feel like his movies always go like 20, 25 minutes too long. I think This Is 40 was a perfect example of that. It starts to get slow and muddled. And I think that this kind of how you echoed with Toy Story. I think, Carpenter making it 90, I think it was like 93 minutes or 91 minutes or whatever. You can't cut anything out. I think everything serves a purpose in this film. And I think that's the beauty of this film. And I think that's why it's such a, revered classic. And I think it's because of everything about it serves a purpose. There's no wasted time in it. And I think that's the best part about this film.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I also like that there's a kind of like lighthearted campiness to it that is different than some, like really heavy, really graphic horror films like you would see today. Even taking a movie like Don't Breathe, which I really like Don't Breathe a lot. Don't Breathe takes itself so much more seriously than this does.
Yeah, for sure.
It doesn't feel like the same kind of movie. And I know that this movie was one of the original, like it was one of the ones that kind of created that 70s, 80s horror genre. And it feels like it. It feels that way. It feels like there's a campiness that's very specific that I don't think was probably as common prior to this and executed quite as well. He's a creepy fucking villain too. He's super creepy in this movie. Yeah,
he is. I think the simplicity of it, I think, is chilling in itself. It doesn't try to wow you. And I think, Hunter and I were obviously talking in our last episode, we were talking about Wes Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street, where, 6 years later, you've already had the release of this film. You've already had the release of the original Friday the 13th. You've had The Shining. You've had all these other different horror films that have kind of paved the way a little bit to give Wes Craven a little bit more ideas to how he was going to set up a Nightmare on Elm Street. And I think Carpenter kind of takes it and he makes it simple. I compare this film kind of like Psycho. It's very simple. This movie lives and breathes on its score. And I think that, and I feel like that's what makes this movie so effective.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. What the hell happens, by the way, at the end there when he's got the knife and he gets like the dart in his neck? What I was trying, like a thing goes in his neck and he falls over behind the couch and she thinks she's killed him.
It's one of those crochet needles.
Yeah.
And does she throw it at him? I was like watching
and it's weird because that's the other thing another thing like I kind of like was like it kind of echoed the scene with the closet. You know what I mean? She randomly gets the coat hanger and just like perfectly jabs him in the eye.
Yeah.
Like, come on, that's gotta be that's a hard shot and it's in the dark.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was a crocheting needle, and I think she just randomly had it and she hit him in the side of the neck. It looked like I'm pretty sure.
She like stabbed him in the side of the neck, which dropped him for a minute.
That could possibly kill somebody.
Yeah, I think those are like some of the beats where I talk about the execution not being quite as good maybe as something today. It was like a little more unclear to me what the heck had just happened there.
Yeah. I feel you on it though for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get to our favorite moments in this film, and there's a lot of them. Russ, do you want to?
I'll start. And it's really at the beginning of the film, and I love the scene when right after Tommy Doyle drops the pumpkin, he falls down and smashes it. You see Michael Myers stopping the one kid, and then you see Tommy Doyle walking through the school playground, and you just see. It pans where Michael Myers is kind of just watching him, and you can kind of just see his peripheral just move along with Tommy Doyle. I think it's haunting, and I love how Carpenter sets the camera up in the back seat of the station wagon, and you get that whole entire view, like he's just watching him and scoping him out. It's chilling. It's super haunting, and it's shot beautifully. I think it really gives you goosebumps when you're watching it. You get the feels watching it, so it's definitely one of my. One of the scenes I really like, not my favorite, but I just because it happens at the beginning of the film, it's the one that I go back to just because I really enjoy that scene.
Yeah. All right, Ben.
I think for me, probably aside from obviously the moment, like I mentioned at the beginning, where Michael's holding the knife after he kills his sister. It's his sister that he murders, right? To start the film.
Yeah, Judith.
Yeah. Yep. I really like when she's walking down the street, Lori with her friend, and they see him standing there by the hedges.
Oh yeah.
And it's because that's like you see him a little closer there for a second. He's a little clearer, and it's like he's just stalking her. And obviously, you know that it's too early in the movie for anything to happen behind that hedge. You know that her friend is going to go around, and it's going to have to be a red herring. It's like a classic storytelling trope. But you're still just like, what is going to happen here? And he is close by, and he's stalking her, and he says he's taking his time. And just the fact that he was still so close by. He couldn't have gone far, but he's decided to like just continue to kind of creep and stalk them. I really like that moment, especially because of the placement and the use of the narrative there, where you kind of, as a viewer, you just like, there are beats they can't hit so early, and they don't.
It makes you really second guess, like, oh, are they actually going to do something here? And then when they don't, you're like, oh, it's that trope that every movie uses.
Right.
You kind of hold your breath for a second because you don't know. Annie goes and checks it out. You're like, well, what happened? You know what I mean? Is she going to be okay? Because you know what you saw. You know what Laurie just saw. So you're like, Annie's one of those, and she's a different character. She's not as reserved as Laurie. She's more, she's more outgoing, and she doesn't really care.
Yeah.
And I think that really leaves you on the edge of your seat too, because you're like, when she gets close to the hedge, you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And I think that's Carpenter shooting it beautifully from that scene, like how you said, Ben.
I also really like how when the film opens, they don't waste any time, right? They're not setting it up and like this is where this character came from or why. Like, you're just in his point of view right away. Yeah. The story starts with a murder and it's from his perspective immediately. And like at first you're like, oh, again, am I going to be fooled? Is this like, if somebody's got the knife, okay, maybe it's not really a killer. And like, nope, murder is going to happen. Now this movie's going to start.
Yep. And that actually goes right into one of my favorite moments is that the whole opening scene, because it's more chilling because you see it in the first person aspect of it. Like Michael's walking through the house and you see him pick up the Halloween mask. And he puts on the mask and then you see him go and grab the knife and then you see the murder happen. So it's more intense because it feels like you're actually there experiencing what's happening. And just the camera work, the way that they kind of had the slow build from like, all right, we're in the kitchen and now we're going up the stairs and now you can kind of see the mirror of his sister and then the murder. And then when Michael comes out and it's revealed to be, the 6-year-old child, you're like, whoa, like a 6-year-old did this. Now we're right into it. And it doesn't, as Ben said, it doesn't waste any time about, setting up Michael Myers as this character, but really as this kind of insane child murderer, and you're there to experience the ride.
Right. Well, you're sort of like, you're sort of like, I don't necessarily need to know why this kid is the way he is. And as I allude to later, the devil is here, right? They say that.
Yeah.
And so you're sort of that. And he has the supernatural kind of strength and like he's sort of unkillable, right? Like that's the story of Michael Myers.
Yeah.
I mean, again, obviously we saw what happened at the end of the remake, and I have a feeling he's coming back. So,
for sure. But it's a common trope with everybody though in that whole entire slasher genre. Obviously you have Michael Myers, you have Jason Voorhees, you have Freddy Krueger. It's all the same stuff. They're always you can't beat them, you can't defeat them, and I think that mystique adds more scariness, I think, to these films just because of that.
Yeah.
All right, back to Russ. You want to give us a few?
Yeah, this is right near the end of the film. I love this part of the film. Jamie Lee, it's funny that we were just talking about it. The closet scene, she's already stabbed him in the eye and stabbed him with the knife. She is leaning perfectly between the doorway, and we see Michael Myers laying down, and slowly, like The Undertaker has perfected in WWE, slowly sits up, and it's perfect. You can see you see her and you can see Michael Myers perfectly in that shot. It's perfect. And just how you're like, oh shit, look behind you, like, and the music goes that dun 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 dun, and it's so simple, and you see her slowly starting to walk, or slowly starting to walk on the side of the wall and stuff like that. And he's there. He's going to get her. And it's just so chilling, and it just really leaves you. And I've seen this movie so many times, and I'm still on the edge of my seat. I'm still trying to tell Jamie Lee, let's move faster. Let's hurry up. You're taking your time, but she thinks she's defeated him. And I think it's perfect score, perfect timing and placement of the score, and it's just the shot. It's beautiful, and I really, you're on the edge of your seat the whole entire time through that scene. I love that scene.
Of the original 3, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Halloween, which do you think is considered like the sort of classic, the best of the 3?
It's funny you mention that because Chance Ellison and I, we talk all the time about horror movies, and we have our own podcast where we picked our favorite horror film, and I went Halloween. But Nightmare on Elm Street, literally, it's 1 and 2. Those two are like, it's like, I think I can do more without Friday the 13th. I feel like Halloween and Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street bring their own thing to the table.
Yeah.
They're different films. But which you're saying which one overall would I rate as the best?
Is there a consensus of the three that is like considered to be the best?
Man, I don't know. Do we just say Halloween because it was first? You know what I mean?
Right.
It set the table for what was to come. I'm thinking maybe because of that, because it was so intricate in setting up the slasher genre that, you know, obviously you had Friday the 13th come out 2 years later. And 4 years later was, Nightmare on Elm Street. So I would say Halloween just based upon what it has done for the horror genre. Mm-hmm. But, God, I really love Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, and that's where I'm kind of leading to is Halloween, just because, well, also I just think it's kind of a slightly better, well-made film than Nightmare on Elm Street, as the way of like the way the camera moves, the way the dialogue kind of works, how it feels kind of like teenage dialogue between Laurie and her friends, and like kind of how it doesn't have jump scares, but it has like real intense moments in this movie where it's like edge of your seat, like tension building. And I think A Nightmare on Elm Street is really, really good, but I think there's just some parts in there that I can pick out to be like, maybe we shouldn't have this part or this part. Like, there's some stuff I can take out where I can't really do it in this movie.
Right. That makes sense.
So now viewing Halloween 78 for the first time, Ben, what would you say overall from the three? Because I've taken you've seen obviously Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday.
No, I've never seen any of the three.
Oh wow. Okay, so that was your question leading into it. Okay.
That was sort of my thing, right? And so like you talk about genres you grew up watching, and you have to have an older sibling, I think, that cares, or by the time I got to like the age where I was binging old movies, it was already well established that like the old sort of classic horror genre just wasn't one that I would have. I didn't have a lot of friends that loved it. I didn't have a lot of opportunities to talk about it. So I would watch way more like old like 40s noir movies, or I'd end up watching like everything Paul Newman had ever been in, or like like every Sidney Lumet movie or something. Like those are way more crime and drama. Yeah. And so there's a lot of this genre that I've just like never really been exposed to. So I thought it's funny to watch the first one with you guys here.
Oh, that's awesome though. I grew up an only child, so it was I literally grew up like I remember being like 6 or 7, literally just watching scary movies. Like I would rent like. I remember watching the Dream Warriors at my grandma's house. Like these are movies probably nobody should be watching this stuff. And I can only imagine what the hell their reaction was. And I don't even remember because they probably weren't even in the room watching it with me, obviously.
Dream Warriors like the third one, maybe?
Dream Warriors the third one. Yep. And like I said, I just remember running like Freddy Krueger movies. I grew up on that. And then I kind of just like, there was all sorts. Then like you fall down the rabbit hole. You start watching Halloween. You start watching, Friday the 13th and stuff like that. I think Friday the 13th would be the weaker of the three. Original. I mean, I think it's a consensus for me and Hunter. I would say, Nightmare on Elm Street is a damn good film. I think, there's a lot that Craven really amps up the slasher genre, but this really gives rise to the female, the female badass, with Jamie Lee Curtis. You have, Heather Langenkamp, obviously, and Nightmare on Elm Street, and then even past the baton down to 1996, you got Neve Campbell, in Scream.
Right,
I mean,
Scream.
You have a lot of these female characters that are really strong, badass, and I really think that Jamie Lee Curtis kind of put her stamp on that whole horror genre, badass female protagonist. I
mean, and then you have the sci-fi turnout at the very next year in Alien.
With Sigourney Weaver, and then even
5 years later, Terminator.
Terminator. So I really think that Halloween is a intricate film, and I think it's important in different genres too. Not just so much a slasher film, but how you even said, Ben, just the female protagonist.
Yeah. And see, being the oldest in my family, of 3 siblings, I showed my brother this movie like quite recently in like the last year or so, and he absolutely loves it. So I'm glad that I'm actually able to pass down like these are the horror movies you need to watch because these are some of the best.
Right.
Like
classics.
Yeah, like I showed him Shining, and that's one of his favorite horror movies.
Well, I mean, Shining to me, like, so when I compare Shining to this, and I talked about the genre kind of,
Mhm.
they almost don't feel like they're in the same genre. That's kind of my point, right? Like there's a campiness to this movie that's great and it's creepy and it's fun, but like you've had, 9 sequels now. So like the idea of an unkillable protagonist or an unkillable villain and all this stuff, it's all this is the earliest riff on those jokes, on those not even jokes, just like those themes.
Yeah.
Whereas you watch The Shining and you're like I can watch The Shining and I'm like, these opening winding tracking shots of this car on this winding road are like mesmerizing. I mean, the performance is amazing. It's doing something like on such a different level than this. It feels much more like a drama that's utilized the horror backdrop as its subject, but like not
almost like a horror thriller. You know what I mean? It's more of a thriller.
Yeah.
The thing I like about, speaking of The Shining, it's the thing I liked about Kubrick is just the fact that you can watch his movies so many times and upon rewatch get something different from it. And that's what I love about Kubrick as a film director. Just because watching The Shining, you take away something different each time you watch it. And I think that's what makes a film, really great too. Makes a great filmmaker as well.
Yeah.
Things I liked about, though, honestly, Halloween 78, though, the thing I found crazy is Carpenter shot this with a $300,000 budget.
So inexpensive. So crazy.
Yeah, and it's crazy. And I told Hunter at the beginning of the film, when we see the leaves and stuff like that, they actually had people collect leaves in a bag and they'd sprinkle them out around the area they were shooting at. Okay, because if you look in the yards, like I'm talking far in the distance, you can tell there's not a leaf, no leaves in any yards, and the leaves are all on the trees and stuff like that, because it was shot in California. So obviously it's different than it is here, obviously in Pennsylvania in the fall. But I just thought that was so cool that the little things that they did, the simple things that they've done like that throughout the whole entire film to save money. I was telling Hunter before shooting. I was kind of curious why they chose the William Shatner mask. So I kind of was looking it up. I was kind of doing a little research and digging, and I found out that they literally were only getting paid like $20 a day. Some of the people that were actually in the film, and they were at a convenience store or some kind of store or whatever, and they saw a cheap $1.98 mask, and it just happened to be a Star Trek William Shatner mask, and it was cheap and inexpensive. So they were like, you know what, let's just go ahead and get this. And they took it, obviously spray painted it, kind of widened the eyes a little bit, added the hair and all that stuff. And boom, that's what you have, the iconic William Shatner Halloween mask. I thought that was so cool, though.
Is that who that is? That's William Shatner?
That's a William Shatner mask. Yeah, it's based on, if you do a Google search or whatever, type in, William Shatner Halloween mask. And it pretty much, you can kind of see it. It's a poorly done.
Very poorly done.
But you can see it resembles him. So it obviously is, William Shatner. And obviously in the 70s, obviously, Star Trek was big. I mean, Star Trek's been big for a while. So it makes sense that...
I mean, the Star Trek movie came out the very same year. So, Or the next year. Take it back there.
Yeah, 79.
So you're looking at, I mean, it was like a cheap mask that they ended up finding that, and they ended up finding that clown mask they ended up using for the opening shoot, which I thought was actually really cool. But they did a... inflation in 2008, and what Halloween gross would be the equivalent of $150 million film.
Oh wow,
which is crazy. And this is like literally like Blair Witch Project numbers, because you look at Blair Witch, I think was shot for like $30,000, and ended up making like over $200 million. It made buku bucks.
Somehow.
But this was and this was one of the Halloween was one of the most successful independent films on that $300,000 budget, which is dirt cheap if you think about it. Some of these other films, like look at even Cleopatra, how much I'm sure that they put into that. Cleopatra cost tons of money to produce too. So to see this years later, and Carpenter's only working with $300,000, it just really shows you and it attests to how what a great filmmaker he is, and on top of it, just what a great film he ended up putting together.
Let me ask you guys. Towards the end of the film, you see the mask come off really briefly, just before he gets shot.
Yep.
How many Halloween films does that happen where you see his face?
I believe it's only this one.
I assume. I had a sneaking suspicion that was the case, because it seemed uncharacteristic. It seemed weird they would do that. Like, it just didn't make any sense. Like,
There's another one where he does it, Hunter. I don't know which one. This isn't the only one. I'm pretty sure. There's another one. I can't think of it's maybe 4 or 5. There's another one where you see his face. I can't think of which one, but it's funny that you mentioned that because the guy that was the unmasked Michael Myers was Tony Moran. And it was funny because my wife and I ended up meeting him. He was actually right around the area here for the for a signing and get a picture with him and stuff like that, which I thought was kind of cool. And that's his claim to fame. Obviously, he's the unmasked Michael Myers. So obviously, you know what I mean. You know, Nick Castle obviously is the one that gets credited for being the Michael Myers.
Yeah.
But Tony Moran, his claim to fame is he's the unmasked Michael Myers. And we went over, got a picture with him, got an autograph, and literally that same night went and saw the 40th anniversary of Halloween. It was playing right next door. So I thought that was like
very cool.
Very perfect timing. And I thought it was awesome. But yeah, real nice guy. I just thought it was a funny story because you kind of like really like just wrote into that. So I thought that was funny to add that little add into that little tidbit of information.
Yeah, very cool.
All right, Ben, do you have any more favorite moments you want to throw out?
No. I'll let you guys kind of continue on here.
How about scenes that you could? How about a little bit of scenes that maybe do you have any extra scenes that you really enjoyed, Hunter, or do you want to?
I mean, I have a few. Like, I love the fact that you don't see any blood like at all in this movie.
Yeah, it is really interesting. Just a little bit on the one obligatory boob shot in the beginning.
Yeah, the obligatory boob shot, and you see a little bit of blood with the tow truck driver. You happen to see a little bit, but it doesn't. And that's the thing. And that's the thing that I think Hunter and I were like alluding to at the beginning, like before we were on cam. Just talking about how simple Carpenter shot that. Like he didn't have to wow you with gore and stuff like that. Fast forward to 6 years later, and you'll see later whenever you watch Nightmare on Elm Street, it's completely reversed, man. Like the gore factor, like all bets are off with Craven. And I think again, to just add to what Halloween really set the table for the slasher genre. I just really think that this film's simple. It's simply shot, just like Psycho. I can keep comparing it to Psycho because I feel like there's a lot of the same beats that I feel like both films have, and even like Sam Loomis, the main character, Donald Pleasance's character, is one of the main guy in Psycho. Mm-hmm. So
interesting.
So there's a lot of ties, and Jamie Lee Curtis's mother was obviously Janet Leigh, who was in Psycho. So there's some ties there to it, which I thought was which I think is really kind of cool for horror lore. But did you say so? That's you like that scene you said there, Hunter? What other scenes?
Yeah, and I also like the scene where Michael kills, I believe it's Linda's boyfriend. The way he stabs him.
Yep.
And then his body just like dangles and hangs with a knife like in his body.
Yeah, I was thinking about the physics of that for a second.
There is no way that would work, but
there's no way that knife's holding up the body up. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Well, I think isn't some of that like they don't illustrate Michael's like sort of superhuman strength in that moment.
Yeah.
But I think that's supposed to kind of be the idea, maybe, is that he's pinned him into the wall so hard
that it's like literally stuck through.
Like sticking in there.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, yeah, but like even like if he was so strong, that that scene with Annie, man,
just makes no sense. But
that scene with Annie, like really, he's like really choking her for a while. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if he's so strong, like I mean, so there's some scenes that I kind of you're like, really? Like, I mean, they kind of like get you wondering, really does that really make sense? But I mean, it's still a fun film. You can cut that apart with any film.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, I mean, that's like, again, you look at a lot of movies, and when movies get franchised, they learn things about the franchise. They learn things about the character as they're making the movies. So, if you go back to the beginning of Fast and the Furious, you watch the first Fast and the Furious movie to now, it's not really the same genre anymore. They're heist movies now.
Yeah.
The first one was just Point Break with cars. Like you look at like Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and the handling of Steve Rogers and Chris Evans as a character in that movie, through the way that he functions in like Endgame.
Yeah.
And it's not even the same character basically. He's
I mean,
he's Thor with a shield in the last movie. In the first one, he's a really strong dude.
Yeah, I mean, and even Ethan Hunt in the Mission Impossible films, really, taking his character and pretty much saying, well, like, what death-defying thing is he going to do next? You know what I mean? Really, really changing it away from 90, De Palma's, 96 film.
Mhm.
But I mean, I think, and that's something that you'll see like with Friday the 13th, whenever you decide to watch that, to really start seeing like the holes in Jason Voorhees lore, I should say. Like they really start adding things here and there that really kind of like, really like we're really doing this now. And obviously, Jason X in space. So like, you're like, really, like, how do we do this? Like,
That's one. I actually saw Jason X when it came out. That's the first one. That's the first one of those I ever watched.
Oh boy!
Yeah, my buddy and I remember we rented the home video. It was probably a VHS tape.
That's a rough one.
Oh, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
That movie must have come out in 2000 or something like that, or like
I want to say when did that come out?
2002 maybe.
I want to say 01 or 02.
Yeah, right in there.
Because it came out a couple years before Freddy vs. Jason. Because the Freddy vs. Jason was 03?
03.
04? 03. Yeah.
And then I have one more favorite moment, and that's when Laurie goes to Linda's house to look for her, and she opens the door, and you see, I believe it's Annie is dead with the Judith Myers tombstone on the bed beside her. Just that whole image of her with like, she's dead right here, and then you have this big tombstone of his sister that says Judith Myers on it.
Yeah.
It's a really cool, like, shocking scene to see, because they set it up at towards the beginning of the movie when the tombstone is gone.
Right.
Has that great line, "He's came home."
Right.
Yeah, so I really enjoy that one. I have a whole bunch more, but we got to kind of move on.
So this is for Ben. So Ben, having watched, you've seen the 2018 one, obviously. Okay, now seeing Halloween. Now Halloween 78 obviously goes. Okay, we're ignoring everything else that has happened. We take it right to 2018's Halloween. How do you think they did adding all that together?
I thought it was really great. I mean, I also think I can speak a little bit more officially on that newer one, just because I like I said, I did the press line last year. I spoke to David Gordon Green a bit about it, and I know that he and Danny McBride work on that film together. They come from such a different background. And they're such comedy guys in terms of like what they think is funny. They're so invested in the history and the throwback of all this. So the new Halloween, it's almost like not really a fair fight. So much of that movie gets to play off the history. This first movie doesn't have any of that. I mean, you mentioned Psycho, and I think it's a good comparison because there are throwbacks. There are things that he had seen in films before. He's like, okay, so when this knife is going in at the beginning here, in Psycho, this is how they do it. So this is how I'm going to do it, right?
Yeah.
You look at the new Halloween film, and like, it's obviously so much more developed. You also have such a different approach because like the young female characters are treated as these like very alluring sex objects that are very strong and like, it's almost like the wink by the director. It's like, hey, they're more than just sex objects, you asshole. That's kind of like the whole idea. Is like, he's preying on these young women who can beat you, and it's like Jamie Lee Curtis is like 60 in the new one. And yes, there is the younger girl character who is kind of filling that same role. Yeah. But Jamie Lee Curtis ultimately is like, she's your tough mom, basically. Yeah. Like she should be your tough grandma at this point. Like, so your protagonist feels like a very different character. And I mean, the new one was pretty violent, pretty creepy. That you're talking about the violence from a few years later in Nightmare. I would have to think that new Halloween has equally. I mean, he just beats that guy. Doesn't he just like destroy his skull in the bathroom?
And you even look at 07's Rob Zombie Halloween 2, which I know it gets a lot of hate and stuff like that. I do like a little bit of the backstory about Michael Myers and how he became. I love the simplicity of the 1978 one, but I also respect the version of, let's get a little bit of reason why. What led him to do these horrific things? What really made the time bomb, explode? And
they don't explain the mask in this movie, which I think is fascinating. Yeah. Why does he have that mask? Where does it come from? The mask has this legendary significance, obviously, in the remake, or not the remake, but the 2018 reboot. Yeah. But they don't explain it in this first movie. So you're just left with like, this is why this kid is the way he is. He's crazy. He was born the devil. He's going to kill people. Yeah. Enjoy.
Yeah. And that, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Hunter.
And that's the one thing I really love about this is you get just enough from Loomis talking to Brackett when he's like, the devil's eyes, you know, I met this guy or this kid when he was like 6 years old and this and that. And that one scene right there, you really understand what you have to know about Michael Myers. And it's so simple. It's so to the point that it is so simple, but it also works for this type of story.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree with you. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, like talking about how much time would it add to this film if you tried to build all that backstory in, and would it have any of the same identity that it has?
No,
and I think the answer is no. I think you would feel like for better or for worse, Carpenter wasn't equipped to make that movie yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he wasn't ready to make a movie that had as much depth.
Yeah,
he was the perfect filmmaker in 1978 to make this movie the way he made it.
Yeah,
and I think it's reflected in his later films. He starts to play with more and he learns more, but this is so early in his career. There's sort of no rhyme or reason to most of what this movie's about.
Yeah,
it's most of the characters don't really have strong motivation. They don't really need it.
Yeah.
Loomis is sort of obsessed. He's fascinated by Michael Myers. That's one trope. You have the damsel in distress, strong female character, and you have the devil, and that's that's a consistent theme. Those three hits stay very consistently through a lot of these films. Like even watching the new one, somebody leans over and is like, "Oh, that's the new Loomis." It's like
Well, because what I told Hunter before, Loomis's character reminds me of there's a couple characters that come to mind. Quint from Jaws. And Ahab from Moby Dick. It's one of those things where he is just so obsessed and fixated on defeating this entity, this monster, this thing, and he'll do anything he can to do that. And I think he has borrowed tropes from obviously Quint and obviously the Jaws 3 years prior, and I think Moby Dick. I think there's a little bit of shades of that for his character. I think that's a little bit what makes Donald Pleasence such a great character, though. I think he really. I couldn't see anybody else playing this role because I think Donald Pleasence really does it great.
Yeah, he's really wonderful. Well, also, I mean, the other thing too, this is back to our Shining point a second ago, but like genre filmmaking was not as developed in 1978 as it is now, even as it was 10 years later. I think when this movie got made in 1978, I don't think people were like, "Oh, it's one of those new horror movies." I think it was kind of like, this is a movie about a crazy guy in a mask that kills a girl. It's horror drama, like. As mainstream filmmaking embraced genre filmmaking, then you started to have like the horror genre. You would suspend your disbelief for certain things they could do in this genre. So a lot of those larger than life things we talk about, the comedy or these unkillable villains, like they didn't exist in the 40s. You had like Dracula and the Wolfman, and you had like the villains and the monsters you were dealing with in these movies. They were of a different kind.
Yeah, and speaking of how you said, genre, defining, I think we'll have this conversation maybe 10, 15 years later when we look back at Get Out, just for the whole way that, Get Out really shapes movies moving forward. I think we're going to have a conversation about that too.
Yeah, because
because Get Out almost doesn't feel. Get Out's a horror movie, but I've said this before. Like Get Out's the most approachable film ever made about race. And that's such a different statement. It's such a different testament from that movie than you get out of guy in mask tries to kill girls. Which as you said, like the strong female protagonist is a theme that you get from this movie. That's really important. So this movie makes its impact in its own way, but
and it really does elevate the horror genre, or not the horror genre, but the slasher genre of things. Because obviously this, like I said, 2 years later you have Friday the 13th, and 4 after that you got Nightmare on Elm Street, and you have all these other knockoff, slasher films that come out and try to duplicate or pretty much use that blueprint Carpenter's success and kind of go their own way with it.
Yeah, because then you had movies like Prom Night came out a few years after. What was it? Friday the 13th came out after. Like a few years after that.
Black Christmas you can throw in there too.
Yeah, Black Christmas, and then of course in the 90s, Scream had that new element of the teen slasher, but with kind of a comedic, like self-aware humor. That's where that really kicked off in that era as well.
I saw Prom Night in theaters, believe it or not.
Really? Wow. I saw it in
theaters.
I saw the remake of Prom Night in the theater.
Well, that's probably the one I saw in theaters.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Okay. The one with Brittany Snow.
Prom Night from like 2008, probably.
That is absolutely, yeah, that's Britney Snow. Yep.
Yeah.
The remake.
My friend,
Yep.
my friend John is the slasher. He's the bad guy in that movie.
No shit. That's awesome.
Oh, awesome.
Very cool. Very cool.
I don't know if either of you guys ever watch Action Movie Anatomy, but we had John on the show for Collateral a long time ago. John Sheck. He's like Jonah Hex on Legends of Tomorrow, and
I think I did watch
he was the singer, and he's the singer in That Thing You Do. In the band.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
I'm gonna go back and watch that episode then.
I'm absolutely gonna have to, because I absolutely listen to a lot of your podcast stuff now that
Me
you're
too.
on your own feed now. I really enjoy that.
Thank you.
What no, go ahead, Hunter. I'm sorry.
We should move on to favorite lines, but you can get to your point real quick before we head to favorite lines.
That's fine. We'll just wrap. Yeah, we'll go ahead and go to favorite lines. Yeah. Did you have any of the memorable lines that you took from this film, there, Ben?
I mean, I think you talked about it when you see that tombstone, and he said he's come home.
Yeah.
I guess those are different moments, but I do like that. Like, what is the line about him being the devil? Is it that the devil has come home? Is that what he says?
I think Hunter has it. Hunter, what is it?
Well, when Loomis is talking to Brackett, it has he goes, "I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, and motionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes." That's one of my favorite lines in the whole movie.
Yeah, that one really stuck out to me. I like that one a lot. Yeah, what else? I also love when the one girl is sitting there on the bed and he's standing there in like the sheet and she's talking to him.
Yeah.
And she's like, "All right then. Well, this isn't going anywhere. I'm gonna just go."
Yeah, that's super funny. It's super scary though. Like, and I like how they pay homage to it in the 2018 Halloween. They really steer you a different way that you think it was gonna go one way, and it went a completely different way, which I respect, because I was kind of like, "Really, we're doing this again?"
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
I'll
say one of the lines I really like. It's the end of the film. I feel like all these it's when Loomis has just come in and saved the day from Lori, and she goes, "It was the boogeyman," and he goes, "As a matter of fact, it was." That's before he goes and walks out and obviously sees Michael Myers is not there, because 6 shots to the chest area and falling from a ledge of the house cannot kill you. So
no killable.
But yeah, I think that's a good line.
Oh yeah.
I'm trying to think what else. I'm trying to think what I'm trying to find that one about the devil. I'm doing that right now. Is there any other ones that you like there, Hunter?
I mean, I have one. It says it's Loomis talking to Brackett at the very beginning of the film. He goes, "Death has come to your little town, Sheriff." Because
maybe that's what it was. Not the devil. Maybe it's death has come to your town.
Yeah.
That's the line I was looking for.
Yep. And then this one's just funny to me. It's Annie talking to the guy on the driving the car, and she goes, "Hey, jerk."
Speed kills.
And then she goes, "I hate a guy with a car and no sense of humor."
Yeah. Also, that's a creepy moment too when he says "speed kills" and the car stops. That was great.
Can we say there's no way in hell he would have hurt her?
No.
Can we just say that? I mean, because like he is clearly passed. There's no way in hell. She mutters that. And yeah, but again, it's one of those things where I think, we were talking about it before. It's you have to kind of just go with it. You just kind of have to believe that this stuff can happen. And I think that's what makes magic, in the movies. You gotta kind of turn off the can this happen in real life radar, sometimes, because you can sit there and pick apart everything. But this movie, like I said, it does it. It's one I always go back to, and I think it's just like it's a classic. I'm glad we got to talk about it.
Oh yeah, and I actually have one more, and it's again Loomis is talking to Brackett because they have so many great scenes together, and Brackett actually goes, "All right, I'll stay with you tonight just for a chance that you are right, and if you are right, damn you for letting him go."
Yeah, that's cool.
Because
that's cool for sure.
Like just the way he's like, "Damn you for letting him go," like he's trying to blame Loomis for it, even though Loomis wasn't there, had no idea, and is trying his hardest to get him back because he knows what Michael can do.
But he was trying to get into Smith Grove like that. It was totally the nurse's fault that he was riding with. Like she completely abandoned the car. She really didn't even have to.
Yeah.
Can we just say that he has excellent driving skills for never having taken any
Yeah.
type of formal driving training?
That's a strong point. Yeah. He
Very
just figured
strong
it out.
Yeah, I'm like, seriously? Like, this kid has been locked up and incarcerated for the last,
15 years.
15 years. I mean, he's 21 now. He's never driven a vehicle. How can he possibly maneuver this around? Like, I don't know.
I mean, actually,
I found myself sitting there thinking, okay, so when this comes up in a schmoedown match, what are the questions that are going to get asked? What do I need to remember about this movie? And I was like, all right, so they've already asked what outfit he's wearing when he commits his first murder. That's already been a question.
Yep.
They probably will ask how many years after the opening murder does Halloween take place,
and or how old was Michael when he killed Judith? I think that would be
right. So he's 6, and it takes place 15 years later.
He's 6, and then so just think he can buy a beer now when it's present day. He can legally buy a beer now. So just think of it like that.
What state does it take place in? Is it Pennsylvania or Illinois?
Illinois.
Yeah.
Haddonfield, Illinois.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, again, going back to the way they shot, Craven shot Nightmare on Elm Street in California as well.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so crazy that these movies feel Midwest to me. Kind of how, like you said, like
Totally.
Pennsylvania, Illinois, Indiana vibe to it. It doesn't feel like this film was shot in California. And Nightmare on Elm Street's the same way.
Agreed.
All right, so I guess that's pretty much it. We can wrap it up now. So let's get into the closing plugs. Let's start with our guest, Ben. Where can people find you? And go ahead, bud.
Yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you having me on. I obviously am part of the movie trivia schmoedown. I've got a brand with Andrew Guy, my former teammate, called Action Industries. That Hunter's actually a key part of the brand. He works on the advisory board with us and really helps make the content come out there, which is awesome. So thank you for that, Hunter. You guys can go find that on YouTube, and we've got a presence growing there. We've got a live show, New York, August 29th at New York Comedy Club in the East Village. So get your tickets now. We're doing 2 nights before the schmoedown match out there, which obviously, if I take care of business, my next 2 opponents, I'll be playing for the title against the winner of the upcoming match between Dan Murrell and Polyama. So let's cross our fingers that I get there. But I'll be in New York for that weekend, and that should be a total blast. So thanks. You guys can find me on Twitter at Ben Bateman Media. That's probably the best place to interact.
All right, awesome, man. And Russ, where can people find you?
Yeah, you guys can find me on House Hollywood Reviews. I've been dormant on YouTube for quite some time, like really dormant. Chance Ellison and I do a podcast called Notorious by Chance. Check it out. We joined the Facebook group. I think we have over 200 people. So thank you. Keep the support going. We have polls that we put up. We are actually recording the remake of The Wicker Man coming up after this show here.
The cage, maybe not the bees.
That absolutely. And we're going to be talking about what a shit show and waste of an hour and a half of life that movie was. But yeah, you can find me there and pretty much competing in the fan leagues. And yeah, that's really about it.
Yep.
Excellent.
And if you guys did enjoy this, rate us, subscribe to the, I guess, all the feeds everywhere, but especially like iTunes and Spotify are the biggest ones. And also my 2 channels on YouTube are Film Nerd TV and then the Combat Wrestling Network. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next week. Peace.